In 2020, raising money was easier than ever before. And yet, Bryce Kaiser and his wife Lauren did something that was a bit crazy. They said no to all of it. While everyone was raising money because it was, quote, free money during the COVID boom, the HoomHouse founders deliberately chose to stay bootstrapped. Then on top of that, they walked away from maybe the hottest market in the entire world at the time, telehealth. And instead, they just doubled down on one simple growth strategy. 3 years later, it all worked out. They sold the company on their own terms. So in this video, I break down with Bryce his simple approach to building a marketplace business, why saying no to VCs was actually the smartest move they ever made, and the surprisingly simple approach that made their exit possible. But first, let me give you some context of what HoomHouse is. HoomHouse is a software platform that helps board certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, manage the fieldwork supervision process, and it started out as just a side project for Bryce and his wife Lauren in 2015. It's also the same year that he met me, so a pretty darn good year for you, Bryce. Anyways, here's Bryce to explain the very start of HoomHouse.
My wife was and still is a behavior therapist. She was working a lot with the autism population. That was her day job. Then my nephew was diagnosed with autism. He's around 2 years of age at the time. And my wife could see that it was going to be a 2-year wait list for services for him. And I saw that, and I just thought that was ridiculous. And so, my wife, we lived on opposite sides of the state from my nephew, but she was able to do some video calls and provide some support. And I saw that, and I was like, well, why can't we do this for more people? My background is in tech and software, and so it was really easy for me to just imagine building a software platform to connect parents of kiddos with autism with therapists. There's a shortage of therapists in one area and surplus in another area, so why don't we just connect the dots? So that was the genesis of it, and so built something in a weekend, put it out on Twitter, and then it kind of went viral.
So HoomHouse gets started, and it gets out of the gate really well. But if you know anything about marketplace businesses, you know they're pretty tricky because essentially you have a built-in chicken and egg problem. And as Neil Yo, one of the other founders I've interviewed on this channel, he mentioned in the 1.5 deep dive, is that marketplaces are like building 3 different businesses all at once. So you have like one side of the marketplace, you have another side of the marketplace, and then you also have the matching system in some fashion. So you're essentially building 3 big systems that are like 3 different businesses all at once. And when I asked Bryce about this exact problem, he had a really interesting and really simple way of putting it, of how he solved it. So here's Bryce to explain.
My whole thing with marketplaces is actually just, instead of dealing with the chicken and the egg, you just deal with either the chicken or the egg. So you focus on one side. And so you have to look at, what do you feel like you can control more easily, and where do you have to experiment more? What we saw was that there was no shortage of therapists that were looking for a new way to make money. And a lot of these therapists were experiencing a burnout. 5 years into their career, they're working in these clinics, they're working in homes, and they're just tired of it. Or now they've started their family and they want to put their energy into their kids instead of other people's kids. And so they were really drawn to this remote work option. So this is, again, we started this back in 2015, before telehealth was cool, before remote work was cool. And so the fact that we had a remote work behavior therapist option available, like the therapists were very happy to sign up. So we knew that that wasn't going to be an issue for that side of the marketplace. What was more of an experiment was the families. How do we get in front of them? There's a lot of legal restrictions around advertising to specific conditions and all that, and we didn't want to get in trouble there. We didn't care to do that anyway. So how do we get in front of those families and get them at the right time, get them the support they need? That was more of the mystery. And so we controlled the therapist side, and then focused most of our energy in experimenting on the getting families in.
So this strategy of focusing on one side of the marketplace ends up working out really well. And from 2016 to 2020, things are just going really well for HoomHouse. They go from text messaging to telehealth, and they're just kind of growing really steadily. But of course, 2020 happens, and when everyone is zagging, Bryce and Lauren decided to zig. But instead of me explaining, here's Bryce to explain their strategy in 2020.
Yeah, so in 2015, the business model originally was we were connecting therapists with families, and typically it was parents of kiddos with autism. We were connecting the dots there and just providing resources and support that way. So first was just a text messaging app, you text for help. Then that led to video calls and led, kind of grew naturally into a full telehealth platform. And there was some underlying infrastructure that I could tap into and white label that made it really easy. And when we had to worry about HIPAA and all that, we were then covered and compliant. But then, fast forward to, 2020 and everyone's getting the telehealth. It explodes. It's going crazy. And there was a lot of pressure to actually take on venture capital at that time because everyone else was taking on venture capital and every telehealth thing was being bought up and grown. It was really sexy, right? But an important thing for me and Lauren was that we would build a company that worked for us and our lifestyle. She went full time on the business after we had our first kid, and she didn't want to go back to a clinic and work there. And she was curious what going full time on HoomHouse would look like. And, so we made choices along the way where we didn't want to have 24/7 support all the time because that was really stressful for us. And we made all these choices to actually fit the business into our lifestyle. Although it was a high growth business that had a lot of breakout potential, we still were adapting it to what, worked for us and what excited us. And so 2020 comes around and everyone's getting the telehealth. And what we saw was that there's actually this, if you get back to the root issue of what was happening in this space, it's that there weren't enough therapists to provide services. So how can we get more therapists through the system that are getting a quality education, quality certification? So that's when we shifted to becoming the marketplace where aspiring behavior therapists could find their supervisor that they needed for their 2,000 fieldwork hours in the field. Aspiring therapists who want to become board certified behavior analysts. They have to work in the field for 2,000 hours. They have to meet with the supervisor for 100 hours. And they often, because there's a shortage of therapists, they didn't have those people at their place of employment. They didn't, they were struggling to get through this period of their career because they couldn't find a supervisor. So we created a marketplace where they could go and see all these supervisors that were out there, reach out to them, connect with them, do some matchmaking. And now we started that not because we thought it was a good idea, but because when we were provided that marketplace connecting therapists to families, we had all these aspiring therapists saying, hey, can I volunteer there? Can I work there? I need hours. Can I get hours through? And we just had all these people asking us to do it. And we're like, okay, well, let's help them out. And that's kind of the theme of HoomHouse all along the way, was us just reacting to the market and what they were telling us to do. That also, became a nice flywheel model because then at the other end, the therapists also were ready to do work and then they wanted to come back and supervise. And so it was a nice flywheel, but we shifted to be that marketplace model.
There's a lot of different takeaways from just that one clip with Bryce, but there's really one main one I want to make sure I highlight here. And that is that you can read the market in kind of two different ways. You can read it from like a bottom up or really a top down approach. And the bottom up one is looking at things from like the more niche, the root causes of things, and really narrowing in. And that's the route that HoomHouse and Bryce ended up taking. There's also the top down, which is really looking at it from like the broader market and the VC trends and more industry and global trends. And that's what Bryce and Lauren were like, nope, not for us. So actually, here's Bryce to explain in more depth why raising money in this top down approach really wasn't the right fit for HoomHouse.
I'd also done venture-backed businesses before. That's where you and I crossed paths originally. And that I still am a proponent of venture capital for the right businesses and the right founders, but it's not right for everyone. And that's what I've learned, being in venture-backed businesses that have raised $20+ million, and then doing bootstrap businesses and doing customer or crowd-funded businesses. Like, there's all these different models of financing your business, but you have to pick what's right for you as an entrepreneur, because there's trade-offs for everything. And I didn't want to be on the cover of Forbes. I didn't want to have 1,000 employees or anything like that. I just wanted to make an impact. I wanted to have a good business. Wanted to employ a few people. But I also wanted to spend time with my family and do those things. So the VC option was not appealing to me because I didn't want to give away the majority of my company. I didn't want to be on this crazy grow or die trajectory. I wanted to stay focused on the impact. Which also, as we were talking to VCs, they all were confused. Like, wait, are you trying to make an impact or are you trying to make money? And I had to say, hey, it can be both. It's a social enterprise. We are doing good and making money along the way. So I wasn't finding, although there were VCs who were willing to write checks, I didn't find VCs that were aligning with my values. Before I even got into the meetings, I knew I didn't really want to go down that route. I had been in enough VC meetings. I had been in the VC-backed businesses. So I knew it wasn't really where I wanted to go. But yeah, then we get into these meetings. You got to entertain them. If someone's offering you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you go to lunch with them. Let's see what's going on. But yeah, and then you get in the meetings, and yeah, you find out that people are just interested in it because of those boxes that it checks, and it fits their formula. Not necessarily that they believe in your vision, your mission. And so we had this nice growth curve, and at that point, we had also figured out how to run with just customer funding. So we were running a lot of Google ads, and we knew how much it costs for us to get a customer in the door. We knew how much the lifetime value was. Knew how much we'd make in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We had the cohort analysis. We had all that stuff. We knew our business really well, and we knew, every customer we closed, we could afford to get, 2 or 3 more customers.
This decision to not raise venture capital ended up paying off in a whole multitude of ways. Bryce and Lauren got to keep the lifestyle that they wanted with their family. They ended up being able to select whatever direction they wanted with HoomHouse. And in 2024, they ended up deciding to sell HoomHouse. So here's Bryce to explain why they decided to sell HoomHouse.
So a couple of reasons. One, I say that we reached the top of the mountain for the business. By the time we sold the company, 1 in 3 aspiring behavior therapists was going through our platform. So, the room to grow is we could maybe 3x the business, or, probably wouldn't. We'd have to do more than providing remote supervision. We'd have to get into on-site and do all these different things. But the model we had could only 3x from there. And we were happy with where it was at. And if we wanted to grow even more, we'd have to go into other credentials, serve another market. And that wasn't our mission. Our original mission, again, the start as a passion project, was just to help a few families get access to services that they need. We wanted to make autism therapy services affordable and accessible for the people who needed it. So if we are suddenly now creating all this software for all these other credentials and other other conditions, it just wasn't right. So that was a part of it. We had just run the course with it. But then also, my wife and I never should have been business partners. I do not encourage people to go into business with their significant others. I love my wife so much. She's amazing. And when I say this, it's mostly my fault, because I am the always on, intense entrepreneur type. And there would be little moments where it'd be 9 o'clock at night, and rightfully so, my wife would be watching a show, trying to decompress. And then we get an email from a potential partner, potential customer, and she's not responding to it. And I'm just, getting frustrated because she's not responding. But, she was in the right, I was in the wrong, but she never wanted to be a high growth entrepreneur. She was a therapist. She just wanted to help people. And so us being co-founders was not the healthiest thing for us. Not to mention, you go through 2020 where we then are, we're working from home. We've got little kids at home. Everything is at home. We had no stories to tell each other when we got to dinner. And so we needed some distance there. And this was all I want to be clear. Everything was good. We just recognized that we were putting unnecessary stress on ourselves. So it was the right time to sell.
Now, it's been a little over a year since they sold HoomHouse, and Bryce is now on to his next idea or next venture, and that is a venture studio called Centered. You can check it out in the link in the description below. Okay, if you're loving this episode so far, check out the Bootstrap report, where I put the data of 56 different Bootstrap businesses all into one report. Their growth strategies, how long it took them to get to 250K, and what the most popular growth strategies were for all of these different businesses. Check it out in the description of this episode. That's the high level story of HoomHouse, but how did Bryce actually grow this thing? He mentioned going viral on Twitter, but that couldn't have been it, right? Here's Bryce giving an overview of all the different growth channels.
Google Ads made everything else obsolete or irrelevant. Google Ads were just so high performing because we had a very transactional service, right? So in the beginning, it was someone looking for, therapists for their family. That's a Google searchable thing. You want to show up in the top results. Then when we were training the next generation of therapists, they're saying, I need a supervisor. And there we are, right at the top. We probably should have done more with SEO. We had some blog posts that were always ranking high up. We put a little bit of energy into it, probably could have done more. But we had Google Ads really humming, and so we didn't really care to go from there. We also, an unfortunate thing we ran into was that we kind of tapped out the market for Google Ads So there's just only so many people who were looking for that service.
Yep, HoomHouse Gross was actually that simple. And here are the 4 different ads, the only 4 types of ads that Bryce ran the entire time on Google. It's a pretty good example of having a niche and really crystal clear defined problem that people have and be able to just like nail the keywords so easily because it's that clear. And because of that, right, once you know like your customer acquisition cost, which is the Google ads here, and once you know your lifetime value of a customer, you pretty much have turned your business into like this really simple math equation where basically it's LTV or lifetime value of a customer minus the CAC or customer acquisition costs minus like the operational cost, and then that equals your profit. And so it becomes like this 4 just elemental math equation that's really, really simple, especially with a growth strategy like this where it's like put money in, get money out, and it takes some time to get there. But as Bryce has shown, once you've kind of figured it out, you have a really solid business and it just turns into a math equation. Now, is search changing and Google Ads changing like drastically right now? Maybe. But SEO still isn't dead, right? So like ChatGPT and these other AI tools, like they're becoming more search engines and those kind of things. So Google is definitely changing, but search on other platforms is still still a thing. So for example, I've done another deep dive on Blank Mason, which is a candle company, and they grow a lot currently through TikTok search and Instagram search. So really, it's proof that search is it's not dying necessarily. It's really just evolving in all sorts of different ways. So that's a deep dive on HoomHouse. If you want to learn more about Bryce, go find him on LinkedIn or go check out his new venture studio centered via the link in the description of this episode.